Topics for today. The big topic I want to talk about is how to the differences between an independent contractor and an employee, right? From the perspective of an employer. Well, also from the perspective of the employee. I think in the U.S. there has been a lot of news about reclassifying independent contractors into employees, and especially around California. I think there was a law that actually came out in California that essentially reclassified most of the Uber drivers or all of the Uber drivers into employees, and it was defeated, I think, in the courts, right?
I don't recall what that outcome was, but this was late last year. It's called Proposition 22, and it would exempt, I can't tell. There's back and forth. They've argued about it. There's courts working on it. It's in appeals. Expensive lawyers are arguing very hard.
If an employee and a company wants to be an independent contractor, why not let them be an independent contractor?
I think there's a long history of that working, right, if they both want to be. But I think for most of the workforce, the independent contractor model is not a great fit. So people figuring out their own employee benefits for the majority of the workforce is a really tough thing to hand off to someone on top of managing life regularly. So the lack of assistance with taxes through withholding, the lack of health insurance, I would argue is the biggest one. And then you can go down the list of other employee benefits that are avoided as an independent contractor, or in certain cases, you could be administering it yourself through your own company. But I think that's pretty tough.
I would agree with that. I mean, from a perspective of an employee, there's some really good benefits of being an employee versus being an independent contractor. At the same time, you have the freedom as an independent contractor to define your own terms of employment, essentially. Technically, what you have to do is just perform or give a deliverable, essentially. But we can discuss this more into detail. The one thing I want to discuss before here now is Robinhood IPO. Just remember, anything we say here is not investment advice. Talk to your advisors, but we want to discuss some of the changes in the marketplace here. Robinhood, ticker Hood, really cool. Had its IPO a couple of days ago from this recording, and today it's up 45%. I think trading was halted even. My opinion, this has become a meme stock. The ultimate meme stock. What do you think?
Haven't watched. I saw a couple of commentators talk about it. This was a direct listing, correct?
I don't know if it was. Was it? No, it wasn't. It was, I think, JP Morgan.
JP Morgan IPO. Oh, interesting. I feel like someone told me it was a direct listing. That's more interesting.
The first day, it was down, I think, 7%. The IPO price at $38 per share. And the first day, it ended up at 34.
Interesting. Okay, so it was an IPO, but they allocated some of their IPO through their bankers to Robinhood users through their app.
Yeah, but they said you're not supposed to flip it.
That's right. You're not going to get access to future IPOs if you flip it too quick. Yeah, pretty goofy. It sounds like a meme stock. It quacks like a meme stock, so I'm going to go with yes.
Is it a meme stock? Yes, it is.
Yeah, I'll officially grant it the title of meme stock.
Thank you.
I mean, is it like a fundamental growth? Is it a GARPy bargain? Would be my question for you.
I don't think so. I mean, so annual revenue is close to $1 billion. That's market cap right now is 57. So even from the price to sales ratio,
57. Okay.
Right. So I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, this is the thing, right? Charles Schwab, the profit margins, they're pretty good. IBKR, which is another one, the profit margins are much lower, 13% net profit margins. Usually a business like that probably commands a price sales ratio of between 6 and 9, I would say. Maybe if it's growing quickly, maybe 11, 12. but not in the 20s, not in the 50s if you're not, if you're doing those are trailing 12-month sales, so meaning past sales. If you're using future sales, which embeds a little bit of growth there, you could get to a lower price to sales ratio. I don't know.
So
I just
what's the market cap change today? You said it's up 40% today, so it's from like 30 something billion to 57 today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It went from like 39 to 57.
Holy cow. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, those Vlad, what was his name? Vlad, and I forget the other
Brad
guy's name.
Tenev and I can't remember the other founder. Yeah.
Pretty wealthy ended up, and the people who funded them. One of them was Jason Calacanis.
Yep. Another one was Howard Lindzen, Social Leverage. I got to go to one of his conferences. I used to work at a co-working space, and an LP of his ran the co-working space and invited me to a Howard Lindzen Social Leverage kind of like pitch day, a bunch of venture funds, some crypto stuff. It was cool. It was nice. Howard's a cool guy and does a lot of. I've liked like just the way he thinks about the world. Very simple, like frameworks to say if he likes things or not. I think he's really clever.
Yeah, but most of this, like I think this business is about execution, and either they've been pretty lucky, or I mean, I think they've done a good job in terms of, adding more products to the platform.
Yeah, of course. What percentage of their revenue in Q1 was Dogecoin trading? Like
I have no idea, but
eight or 10%, something like that.
Oh, really? I suspect it would be in a lot. Yeah.
It was enormous. Yeah.
Yeah, and
They've innovated and they've gotten more investors involved. I tend to be anti Robinhood. When people ask me if they should open an account and start playing, I say no. I don't think it sets you up in the right direction. I think there's a different finance should be boring, not as entertaining as it's made on there. So I don't know. I definitely have mixed feelings. And the access to leverage for the average investor, I'm also quite skeptical of.
I wanted to talk about now the difference between an employee and an independent contractor. Do you have anything to start off with that? Like, I think so. The first thing we should start off is there is a definition of an employee and an independent contractor. The definition of an employee is that, from a practical point of view, an employee is someone who works for a company, but from the taxes, which is more important, is that they pay their share of FICA, which is Social Security and Medicare taxes, and the employer pays half their share too. That's an employee. But if you're an independent contractor, you're both the employee and employer, so you actually are taking on both sides. So you have to pay both of them.
That's an important one from a tax perspective. I zoom out and tell me about the characteristics. So like there is a list, and it's published by the DOL or IRS, and it's going through these different scenarios that point to one direction or another. So on this characteristic, you're more like an employee. On that characteristic, you're more like a independent contractor. Can you talk us through some of those?
Yeah, I don't know if these are the DOL list, but I had this list from some accounting publications where there's three big factors. One is behavioral, the other one is financial, and the other one is like the relationship aspect. So if the company gives a lot of instructions, that indicates that someone is an employee, right? Like you sit in an office, you get a lot of instructions for the day, and that's more of an employee than an independent contractor. If the company is training you to work in their methods, in their way of doing things, that's more of an employee. Usually a contractor, when you hire a graphic designer, you're just telling them, hey, I want a logo that does this, this, this. Or you don't tell the person, I want you to work on Adobe Illustrator and give me the logo in the way I like it for you to do it. No, like you're hiring an independent contractor, you're asking for the deliverable, not the method.
Agreed. I also think I've seen in independent contractor agreements and contracts that they state at the beginning that the contractor is in the business of doing whatever the task is, right? They're in the business of providing graphic design or in the business of providing XYZ type of consulting, right? Whereas an employee is not necessarily like someone who's already in the business. They may have experience doing it, but they're not, for example, they're definitely not offering the same services to someone else in the same capacity, right? Whereas an independent contractor, there's at least an idea that you would be offering your accounting services or whatever it is to other parties other than the one independent contractor agreement.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's a very important topic. Like the other part where it's more of the relationship, but I want to talk about the financial part first, where if the worker has, unreimbursed business expenses and they want to, give it to the employer, that is more of a relationship that indicates like employee, right? So like if I'm asking someone to repay, the cost of, lunch, right? That indicates that someone is an employer, right? Like the independent contractor takes, lunches on their own thing. Like they can prepare lunch at home or go out. The ultimate person who they're working for doesn't care where they get their food.
Right.
The other part is, a company invests in tools and facilities. If those tools and facilities are used for the benefit of the person who's working there, that usually indicates an employee. Like you said, an employee is not there to, once they're working for an employer, they're not going marketing their services to someone else unless they're changing jobs. An independent contractor can still be working for you and still trying to market to get the next gig, right? So it's a very important part, right? Like, so if you're only working for one company, that's a red flag. Even as an independent contractor, that's a red flag. You should be at least marketing your services elsewhere. If the worker is paid by the hour or week, that's usually indicates employee status. Usually, independent contractors are paid for the project, for the deliverable. Right? You don't care so much what an independent contractor does, how many hours. It gets a little bit tricky because lawyers are mostly paid, like it's more of a traditional, I would say lawyers, accountants, other people are usually paid by the hour, except for like when you negotiate, within that tax accountant, you're filing your taxes, you're not asking them, okay, how many hours are going to take you to do my tax return? Usually they tell you like, oh, I'm going to charge you $480 for this one. And that's it. And they take on the risk of working more or less hours. But lawyers, I would say, have resisted that and usually are paid by the hour anyway. God, those lawyers. If I tell you this is a person who is working on a job and realizes that from an hourly perspective, it's going to take them 5 hours. They usually charge $100 per hour. An employee would usually they would get paid that amount. And I would say an independent contractor is going to try to profit out of that. So they're going to charge maybe $1,000.
Interesting. Okay. So you think an independent contractor being in maybe
it's
a
in
less
the business
stable,
of making a profit.
right, being in a less stable situation for sure might command a premium, and being totally. So one thing we didn't mention is just the rights that you have as an employee compared to a contractor. Contractor has almost no individual rights, right? You have this one contract that kind of governs the relationship. It doesn't generally fall under employment law unless you argue that you actually were an employee. They just treated you like a contractor, which I'm sure there's many disputes that work like that. But as an independent contractor, you don't really have rights under state employment law to do all the things that employees can do: get benefits, get covered for XYZ, workers' comp, disability, unemployment, right? There's a lot there that falls under this broad scope of employment law.
I mean, the other thing is part of the relationship. So the three factors: behavioral, financial, relationship. In the relationship part, usually the written contract between the worker and the employer. If it says that you're an independent contractor, it usually means that you're an independent contractor. But in the context of a dispute between the Department of Labor and the employer, they will disregard that. They will not look at that as a factor. Only if the case is really close, they will look at that. So, just because in the contract you say it's an independent contractor doesn't mean that. They're going to look at the other factors as well. If you're providing, your own medical benefits and pension, you're usually an independent contractor. If you're hired to complete a particular task, that means you're an independent contractor. That doesn't mean that you have to be an independent contractor. No, you can actually.
Right. It's a factor in favor. I think the big disclaimer here is you have to ask a lawyer who knows employment law in your particular state. To any particular situation is going to be very unique. You need to look at all the factors, but each of these pieces can lean you in one direction or another. And there's a lot of people asking these questions, and obviously the California Uber, Lyft, DoorDash example is a huge one of people arguing of the treatment of one direction or another. But yeah, each business owner and each contractor / employee, definitely talk to a lawyer to figure out your own situation, see how you can get protected. Cool.
But there's a lot more. I would always recommend talking to an accountant. A CPA usually should know, or not all of them know this stuff, but some people know. And then an attorney, if you're starting a company, you want to hire someone and you don't know if it's going to be an independent contractor or an employee, talk to an employment lawyer.
One place out of left field where I saw this topic come up, I'm reading The Smartest Guys in the Room. Have you ever read that book?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Enron book. It's pretty old, but still really, really good. It's a super detailed account of the rise and fall of Enron, start to finish. And it really seems to me that many of these guys down in the weeds of the off-balance sheet structured products, and just former executives, had just layers and layers of relationships and contracts with all these special purpose entities themselves. So they had partnership agreements and independent contractor agreements, as well as being employees. So certain, they had this habit of former executives getting really rich consulting contracts, right? So when Skilling left, famously, when Enron was, $45, $48 a share in 2001, he was still on retainer as a consultant for a huge sum of money, despite having just quit as CEO and forfeited a bunch of stock options and stuff, which was a jarring moment, a really big moment in the history of the stock. But they mixed and matched, right? They acted as employees and contractors, and that's deep inside of a web of, the dark arts of executive compensation, right? I don't have any advice at all on
crazy.
Navigating all that, but they had a lot of those arrangements. And I want to say that there were times when people were both contracting, acting as a contractor and as an employee, and that's going to be on a situation by situation.
But it was for different entities, right?
Often the bomb that went off inside Enron was that the CFO, Andy Fastow, made an incredible sum of money, something like $60 million over a few years, as the general partner of a small partnership that was doing deals with Enron. So he was telling Enron, I'm only taking 3 hours a week to run this entity. We're just using it for structured finance to do blah, blah, blah. In reality, it was a fake off-balance sheet counterparty, and Fastow was getting this entity, and Fastow by association was making just enormous sums of money by his relationship with this other entity. So, that gets way into the weeds of how many things that he did wrong on behalf of Enron shareholders.
How many years did he get jail? He went for how long?
I think he's out now. I can't remember. It was a long time. I haven't gotten to that part where he's been sentenced and taken to jail. He just got fired, where I'm at in the book.